Hi there, folks. Welcome back to WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. It's episode 227. Last week I got the number wrong again, but I double-checked this time. We've got a very diminished but a very insightful panel here. I've got Sally joining me. But unlike last week, some of our panel have good reason for not being here. They live in the Florida area and they have chosen to be traveling and getting away from a horrendous looking hurricane, which you can't blame them, really, can you? Even I cannot criticize the insight of that decision, can I, Sally?
I don't think anybody can. It just doesn't make sense to me to stand in the path of a hurricane when you know it's coming at you.
Right. So, introduce yourself, Sally, to the audience.
Yes, they've probably forgotten who I am. I think I missed 2 weeks. My name is Sally Getch. My business is WP Fangirl. I build websites for small businesses and nonprofits, and I'm also the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California.
That's great. And I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We're a service maintenance company that specializes only in WordPress, so it's dear to my heart and my wallet. So we're going to go straight into the news section. Basically, it's been dominated again by Gutenberg. Gutenberg.
Occasionally called Gutenberg, yes. I have noticed the news has been the all Gutenberg all the time channel.
Yeah. But there was a fabulous article written by Fred Meyer of WP Shout. They've been on the show. A great group of developers and commentators in the WordPress space. Do go to the website, and he wrote a really I thought it was a top-notch article. I'll be interested to see what Sally thinks about it. Stop presses Gutenberg is what WordPress needs, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. So what did you think of this article, Sally?
I think he possibly didn't pay enough attention to Morton. That although his point is right about where Gutenberg is now and where it will be when it comes out in 5.0, but the projected roadmap of having Gutenberg eventually take over the page layout, etc. kinds of tools means that will be addressed. It just won't be right away. And so we're going to be in this sort of awkward position of, oh, well, there are still a bunch of things that people will need page builders for. And how are they going to get that to, play nicely with Gutenberg? And then, of course, what happens to the page builders if Gutenberg really, takes over those functions in a successful way? I think these are all good points, and some of them, I'm not sure all of them will be addressed when kind of things go, but for instance, the front-end editing. People have inquired about front-end editing in WordPress for a long time, and I think if your back-end editing actually looks like your front-end, that's less of a concern. That one of the issues with the WordPress editor that we have is that it doesn't even pick up your typography from your theme. It really looks very little like what it's going to after it's published, and then that confuses people. And then the next point is, users don't distinguish between a blog and a CMS, and that that people think of both of these at once. And I don't know for sure whether they do. I mean, there are a lot of people who are very non-technical and they don't know what term is what. And then there are people who really do just want to write a blog and have their daily journal of whatever. And some of those people have already gravitated to platforms like Instagram, where they're just sort of posting snapshots of their lives. But you know, that people want to create layouts everywhere, not just their pages or their custom post types. And you know, he's talking about how you know, you can't put things in columns. Well, there is actually there is now a text column block in Gutenberg. We spent all of the weekend of the August the 27th with my meetup testing Gutenberg.
That's one of the slight problems about all this, isn't it? Because it's a moving target.
Well, it is. It keeps changing. So, you know, the team is aware of a lot of the issues and working on them and building some new things in. And they were, you know, we had, I don't know, 5 or 6 people, and basically everybody elected to spend their time testing Gutenberg, and submitted a bunch of different bugs and some feature requests and responses, and you know, there have been actually 2 versions of Gutenberg already in the 2 weeks since then. And so, yeah, sometimes, you know, you'll read some of these articles and say, oh, it doesn't do X. Well, now it does. And you know, we can't tell for sure what the, you know, what shape it's going to be taking at the time that it comes out. And Fred says, you know, we want to.
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
That, you know, so what we want to do is you know, have a front, something that amounts to a, you know, a front end editor, and but you know, I don't know how much is going to you know, how accurate this is. He says, you know, the main issue with Gutenberg being underwhelming is that WordPress then misses the opportunity to bring a sprawling, hyper-redundant ecosystem together around one set of very good choices, which is, you know, which is lovely writing. And you know, I don't know. And
he got into full swing there, didn't he?
Oh yes, I mean, it's a well written article. But you know, I think that the best thing remains: get as many real people as possible, you know, your clients or your friends or your family, to test this, and you know, provide honest feedback about what it's like using it, and where the problems are, because there are certain very serious issues.
It's not exactly concrete, is it? You know, they just keep on improving it, or I'm sure it might not be totally. I was going to use the word perfect. What a ridiculous word to choose.
Yeah, the perfect and software, those do not go together ever.
I'm struggling with the right word. You know, but it doesn't disappoint. It's the general.
Yes, I mean, the thing is,
feeling in the community is it does, you know, it's a reasonable winner. Put it that way. It's a very vague. I'm really struggling with the right word in here.
Well, this is, you know, here is the thing, is that WordPress for the last several years has mostly made, you know, fairly modest incremental improvements in things, and not done anything particularly dramatic. And this is something that, even if it is just, all right, we know that everybody thinks the current editor sucks, because it does. You know, here is a better editing experience, and it is a step on the journey to something more complete. I think that as long as it does what they've defined for it to do well, people will be happy with that. Now, that may not, you know, that the first release is likely to still fall short of we are going to compete directly with Wix and Squarespace, and you know, have your complete, you know, front end experience of blah blah blah. But as long as it's functioning as an editor, it makes it easy to do things people are accustomed to doing, you know, in their posts, and easy to do a few things that they couldn't do in their posts or pages, or whatever. You can use it on pages already. I haven't tried it on custom post types, because my test site is a completely vanilla, you know, 2017, almost no plugins site. And then that's going to be good. And again, as long as they work out the metabox issue for, okay, so how do you still use, Yoast SEO or advanced custom fields or, PowerPress as, within this environment, then I think that will be a win. And then, they have kind of the next step to move on to is how to integrate that with, the customizer, with overall page layouts, et cetera, and so on. And I think that so far they're actually doing a pretty good job. And if you have an issue with it, somebody put a comment on one of my post somewhere that wasn't even about Gutenberg, about it. And I said, well, look, go, if you want to, express as big, go tell the people who are building it. Don't tell me.
Yeah. I'm kind of in two camps here. I totally understand the necessity for it, and it really needs doing. Not only for WordPress.org and the whole community, but for Automatic. They're a commercial company. Their competition is Wix and Squarespace, and when they do get WooCommerce integrated with their online platform, they're going to go head to head to some extent with Shopify, aren't they? It's pretty obvious why they bought WooCommerce, and that's one of the things they're planning, isn't it? And I think a stronger WordPress.com will automatically, sorry for the pun, I didn't mean that actually, benefit the whole WordPress community. Do you think
I think it probably will. There have been people who object that, Gutenberg serves the interests of Automatic and WordPress.com in a way that it doesn't necessarily serve the interest of the people who use self-hosted WordPress. And I don't think that's true. I mean, yes, of course, Automatic is looking to its success as a company. Yeah. But I also think that, this is part of how Matt, at least, perceives the needs of the users. And if the, needs of the actual WordPress users that we come into contact with are, our clients and, people we know at meetups who are, not interested but not expert, then we need to get those people testing it and providing their feedback and letting people know, yes, here is what here is what actual users of WordPress are saying about this.
Yeah, because I really think it's not that, I think my only criticism of the whole thing was based a bit about Morton's input, about, data. It should be driven by data a bit more, and that seemed reasonably logical to me.
It seems overpoweringly logical to me, and we have they presumably have a lot of data in some forms at WordPress.com, but I don't know if they have data that really shows what people spend time on and stumble over when writing and editing, and there will be somewhat more limitation to what they're doing on WordPress.com in the absence of all right, well, it's like I'm thinking about the Now Secure site. There was a great number of custom post types and a number of custom templates made with ACF, and like, okay, how is all of that going to play with Gutenberg? And I don't know yet, because they're still working on that. It's mostly a matter of, okay, well, I should, even though I'm not actively working for them right now, I should make sure that they're aware this is coming down the pike, and may affect some things and may require some some additional development to make things work. I do think that there are going to be a lot of things that will be where the experience will be nicer, having them, being able to use them as blocks, and there are other things where it's harder to figure it out because of something that has one small meta box for you to select something. It's pretty easy to sort of figure out, well, where would you put it in that sidebar controls, and something that has a whole bunch of other stuff. Well, if I mentally look at, say, adding a podcast episode with PowerPress, something I do a lot for my clients who are podcasters, that's a meta box section that normally lies under the main content window. And it's sort of like, well, I suppose you put it in there as sort of like podcast episode block, and then where it has the control section, you have the space for well, here's your URL for your file, and here's your are you going to add additional like keywords or titles or whoosies or whatsits, and that could be done, and probably you could create a fairly similar construction for Yoast SEO. I haven't attempted any of this on mobile, so I have no idea how you would do it there, and I'm really glad I'm not the one who has to figure it out.
Yeah, but I think the criticism is probably too strong a word. I didn't want is that Morton's suggestion that seemed to, and they seem to be some kind of lack of communication about where all this was going, which Matt has done a much better job recently, and that's what I meant about my comment about him having too many hats.
Yes, and that is a challenge, and that when your company has grown to a certain point, you may not be the best person to do hands-on, or if you are going to step in and do the hands-on. I mean, there was a period, right, when somebody else was CEO of Automatic because Matt was working on another thing, and where you need somebody to step in for part of it so that you can devote yourself to whichever thing is what you really need to be doing. And that's tough. It's tough to relinquish control and delegate things.
Yes. I just want to finish, but I was listening to something that really made me think a little bit about how great Matt is in a way, and it was on This Week in Startups. It was an interview of Tim O'Reilly, the founder of O'Reilly Media.
O'Reilly Media, yes.
And Tim has got a book coming out.
Another one.
Yeah, one that he's written. He's only written one other book himself, actually, and it's coming out in October. And I actually probably will get it because he had some really interesting things to say. And what he was pointing out is that most, like when PCs were first being made, or the internet in general. He had
Sorry, just thinking about that thing from Microsoft. Nobody could possibly need more than whatever fairly tiny amount of memory it was.
Yeah, but he was saying how it was a big marketplace with many players, and it consolidated into a few very large players, and that's how most industries go. And I think with the structure of open source and the structure that Matt was really very passionate to make, the defense of open source software, blah, blah, blah. I think he had the foresight to realize that if you don't have this structure, it will just consolidate into a couple major players, and that will be it. Do you think there's anything I've just said, or do you think I'm just waffling?
Oh, no, I think it's it's an observable truth about industries, and tech is one that, because it's come about fairly recently, we've had the chance to see this, that there were lots of different computer manufacturers and operating systems, and it's come down to a relative few, and that doesn't mean there's no room for new players, but it does mean that you're fighting a fairly uphill battle, because some things are entrenched, and we see that WordPress is getting to be relatively mature, and we see that happening. We've talked several times about the acquisitions that have come about, of so that certain agencies get larger by acquiring larger other agencies, and that I know Automatic has made some purchases, and so on, and that is just kind of how things go. If you go far enough back in history, there were, say, lots of oil companies, or lots of tobacco companies, or and now there aren't. There are only a few, and indeed, my father worked for a petroleum company, and in a way it was the same one all the time, except first it was Standard Oil of Ohio, and then they got bought by BP, and then BP and Amoco had a merger, and so you see it happen everywhere. It's going to happen here, and this is unfortunate for a lot of small players, and it does seem to be that it's more important to have a niche. If you're going to be small, you need to be pretty specialized.
I would say to the listeners, please go and listen to this week's startup and that interview, because there's other things, but I don't want to take up too much time with it. But go and listen.
Don't forget to put it in the show notes.
I will do. To finish off, we'll quickly talk about your story, because I read it and it did make me laugh, and it's so true. And it's for the love of God, please tell me what your company does. By Kasper Kubica.
Kubica is how it's spelled. Although I don't know. Since I have no idea what ethnicity that is, I
have no idea myself.
I couldn't guess at pronouncing it, but yes, I saw this. I think it was maybe in my web designer news or something, and
but it's so true, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It is. And, here's the thing is that, I remember in various marketing kinds of classes about, being taught about, creating an elevator speech that, includes
you better tell the audience what the article's roughly about.
So yes, so this is on Hackerman, and basically it's about, so here are all these company websites, and they've got these and they've got these huge hero section landing pages that have some kind of basically inspirational tagline. Innovation is all around you. Are you ready to tap into it? Welcome to Outside Insight. We believe in making people's lives easier. And
how nice.
Right, which is all good, except there's no context. It doesn't say yes, but how. It doesn't say what they actually do, and so you have to keep going further.
They're VC for that. It doesn't matter anyway.
Yes, well, and yet it's it's hilarious. It's kind of
the English sarcasm's really starting to come out now, isn't it?
Well, and it's this is kind of the outflowing of a trend that I've certainly been aware of since the early 2000s, about not just saying what you do when the networking experts are saying, if somebody asks what you do, don't just say like, I'm a web developer. Say, let's see if I can think of something good, but I take your business to millions around the world, or something like that. And the thing is that it can go too far, because the idea with the kind of networking tagline is that then you should have a conversation, that you want to prompt the person to say, oh, and how do you do that? Or what do you mean? And actually then have a dialogue, because, if you just say, I'm a plumber, that, well, sort of end of story, although, except, everybody needs a plumber sometimes. So,
I could be honest with you. I've lost so many clients by not really, by understating what I do, basically. Because I think it's culture.
That's the British thing.
Yeah.
I remember that I was being interviewed for a possible teaching job in England, and one of the people was mentioning somebody else, also American, who had applied for the post, and how offensive they found it that this person claimed to be, the best such and such. And he said, you just wouldn't say that here. You would say, well, I know a bit about.
Yeah, I know a little bit about it, which,
right.
which does not go down with
Americans
American.
Don't understand that.
No. Little? Why should I hire somebody that knows a little?
Right. That you really have to spell it out very explicitly, and excessive claims are the norm, and it's kind of annoying, but if you're going to operate in this society, you have to be aware of that. You don't have to be obnoxious, but you do have to be, you do have to claim your expertise.
But let's get back to this story, because I've wandered off as I do, don't I, Sally? But did you have any kind of insight? What's driving, which I agree with the author, is ongoing. Lost the word again. Is there? It's definitely is onto something. Got to finish the conversation before we go on to our main topic. What do you think's driving this in general?
Well, I think that there was sort of a desire to differentiate yourself, and what I was starting to say is, if you're talking to somebody, you say something that where it isn't clear what you actually do, they can ask a question and you can clarify it. But your website is not a dialogue in the same way. And so if you put one of these vague statements up, you had better follow it pretty clearly about how it is that you make people's lives easier, and what you do, because otherwise folks are going to say, am I in the wrong place? What am I here for? What is this about? Now, yes, most people coming from, search or somewhere are probably not getting to your homepage, but that it's okay to include something, some kind of inspirational tagline, but make it clear what your business is about, because people are not going to sit there figuring it out. And I think that, this has been kind of an ongoing marketing trend, and then people see other people doing it, so they want to do it. I mean, that's how things become trends anyway. Oh, our, competitor does this. And, if the company doing it is so well known that everybody already knows what they do,
it doesn't matter, does it?
Right. And you could get to the, Apple website and just see Think Different.
They could put anything on there.
Right. And people would still know what they do. I mean, of course, it's because you've also seen.
Well, they'd be writing in the advertisement press how clever it was, wouldn't they? That's what they'd be saying.
Right. But, you've also seen everywhere all the billboards showing their products, and so, people would mostly come there knowing what they do. And if you are a startup someplace and you haven't got the budget to take a bunch of billboards out showing your product or service in action in some way, then people are going to get there and not know what you do and not be interested enough to go further and find out. And so, what works for, I've lost track of the number of people, small service companies that want, a website that looks like Apple, and like, no, it's not going to work. That's not appropriate for your industry, for your clientele, for your, that's the thing, is you can't just tell me about a website you like in general. You have to tell me about a website you like for a company that does the same thing that you do, and then we could talk about it. But people see things, they copy them, they take a look at how well they work, and so I think that the lesson for web developers and marketers, agencies that have websites as part of what they are, is check with your client about this. you know, tell them to say, okay, you really like this look and this, but you also need to be clear, and you need to, you need
That's
to
the
have
main.
some data.
That's the main thing I've learned in the past couple of years is what you think is really clear online isn't clear at all. You talk
Well, yes,
about.
it's you know it, and so you think people get it. And this is, I mean, it comes back again to what we were saying about, testing with real users, that you need a group of people. It does not have to be a huge group, but get some group of people together who doesn't know anything about your company, have them look at your website and see if they can tell you what you do, and whether they would, whether they would buy it, or what you do and who you do it for, and they themselves may or may not be part of your intended market.
Yep. A great article. It did bring a smile. We're going to go for our break now, folks, and we'll be back. And we're going to give some, hopefully, some insights about name servers, DNS, Cloudflare, and anything else around this subject which we can throw together that will help you and explain the all this stuff, what it really means. We'll be back in a few seconds, folks. Bye. We're coming back. It's been a small panel, only me and Sally, but actually with Sally's great help, I think we had a reasonable conversation, didn't we, Sally, on the news section?
Well, we have no shortage of opinions here, so.
Are you talking about me?
Oh, I was talking about myself. That's why you have me on the show, right? Because I have opinions, whether or not I have information.
It's normally based on logic to a high level. I've got no problem with opinions, as long as I change my opinions based on the facts. Basically.
Well, yes, that's a wonderful quote to keep in mind. Is if the reality changes, your opinion probably should change.
I've noticed a lot of people don't do that.
Well, we do seem to be living in an era where facts must not interfere with the dogma.
No, facts don't matter anymore, do they? It's there's alternative facts, isn't it? Well, we won't go down there.
No, let's
keep to safe ground.
Let's
keep to WordPress. That. It's much safer, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, in a way, it is. Let's start the conversation on name servers and DNS. Let's go to the basics. Like when we were having our quick pre-show chat, I was saying that I always advise a client to keep their domain name separate from the hosting provider. Would you agree with that? And also, can you go in why that's a good idea? Let's start off with there.
Yes, well, I would certainly agree with that, and I can speak from painful experience. There are a lot of hosting companies, especially the budget shared hosting. It's like, free domain with a hosting account, and
it's very tempting, isn't it?
Well, yes, it's easy to do. You register your domain with your hosting company, and except when it comes time to change hosting companies. And then, so I ended up in a situation, this was a long time ago now, 99, 2000, quite a long time ago now, but I ended up in a situation where the hosting company wanted to charge me an extra, I don't know, $35 or something, in order to allow me to transfer my domain to a new registrar. And I was very annoyed about this, and unfortunately, eventually I gave in and paid them the money. But
I thought you set the cats on them.
No, I hadn't got the cats at the time. The cats are not as old as that, but that just seemed completely outrageous, and so that's one thing is you want to have control.
It's nothing like a bit of online extortion to make you feel good, isn't it?
Right. So you want to have control of your domain, but there's also the fact that separating what is where. So having your web hosting one place and your mail hosting at another place, and your domain registration in a third place, and possibly even your DNS in a fourth place, means that you haven't got single points of failure. That if for some reason your web hosting server goes down, your email will still work. And other things like that. And there was recently that massive DNS attack that took out GitHub and a whole bunch of other things, and kind of reminded everybody about how this can be a problem. And and this is all very confusing for civilians, which is one reason why it's easy to fall into that trap of, I'll just get the free domain. But yeah, then almost every time you go to move hosting companies, and then you have to move your domain, and then you have to, it gets to be a real palaver. And
I tell you, because this, folks, we're going to go through the basics, and if you're a consultant developer, you might think, but hopefully you're still going to get some value from this, because this might seem, this no longer happens, but it was over a year ago, and it's funny, it was with Squarespace. We were helping a client move their site from Squarespace into WordPress. And we had a hell of a trouble getting our Squarespace people to release the domain name. Oh my God!
Oh, well, I have to say, one of the hardest places to transfer your domain name from is WordPress.com.
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
It's horrendous. Just say no.
No, it's. Thanks for pointing that out, actually, because I have heard other people say that it's pretty horrendous, isn't it? So it does. So don't be tempted, folks. Keep it. It is best to go with. There's plenty of people that you can go with. I use GoDaddy quite a bit. There's other people that you can utilize, and you purchase the domain name. But you purchase your hosting somewhere else. So that's step one. And then you've got all the other bit you mentioned about the DNS, with Cloudflare or similar services. Is that like what you said? One of the benefits is that really helps with the email, because if your hosting provider goes down, even with a lot of the specialized WordPress hosting providers, they don't provide email, do they? They
basically take the position that they have one job they want to do well, and that's hosting your website. And it's also become increasingly the case for companies to use a different email provider. So they may be using Office 365 for their Microsoft for their email. They may be using Google Apps for their email. They're most of my business email runs through Google Apps because I signed up for it when it was free, and it's still free if you signed up for it then. Which is very handy, and they're great at filtering out spam, and there have been one or two occasions when there was a blip in my email service, but it's very rare. It's quite solid for that. And I'm sure what with one thing and another, Google is seeing everything I do anyway. Not unduly worried about that. So I had set that up, quite some time ago, and it makes it easier than you don't have to worry about, moving your email when you move your website, and moving email when you move a website is a huge pain.
It's another enormous headache, and that's why you really want not to, even if the hosting provider offers it, you really don't want to use it, folks. But if you don't use something like Cloudflare, I am correct that if their server does go down, the MX records, you're still going to have a problem, aren't you?
Well, you should be okay if I have my own domains registered at Namecheap. And if and before I had Cloudflare, I controlled the domains at Namecheap. So I have, an A record or a C name that's pointed to my website, and I have my MX records set up at, set up with Google's MX. And so the website could go down without affecting the email. But there's nothing that's really protecting the domain itself. So if there's an attack on the domain, that's still somewhat vulnerable. And what happens if you're using something, I wasn't using Cloudflare specifically because I wanted it for my DNS, but that's how Cloudflare works, is you change your name servers over to Cloudflare's, and then Cloudflare provides a layer in between anything coming out, from outside and all of your servers. And it basically gives you an option to say, are you going to sort of, shield this, or is Cloudflare just going to
I gotta say, Sally, fantastic hand movements.
Yes,
you're gonna have to watch this on the YouTube channel, folks, because Sally's been really very adamant with her hand movements trying to explain this.
And it is, I'm a visual kind of person,
yeah.
And which makes it interesting that I hate watching videos. But I haven't got time. I read very, very fast, and I can read it fast unless you're showing me something where I need to see it. I would rather read it than watch it.
I'm the opposite. I like the videos rather than reading.
Right,
yeah.
But for many people, the video is a much better option, so it's good that we have both. So, I've put a few links in the show notes about kind of basic explanations of what the heck is a DNS, and I was just mentioning this to a client because I am going to take her, I'm building something new for her on my local site, and in terms of launching it, and this has meant that no, we cannot keep using the hosting that she's on, which has been okay for what she has, but is not great. But, we're adding a learning management system and a shopping cart and appointments and a bunch of stuff that's going to need better hosting. And so we're going to move hosting. And I said, so what I'm going to do once I finish building it locally is put it on the new hosting company site, and you can check it, and when you're sure, then I get to repoint the DNS. And she said, do the what? What's it DNS when it's at home? And so I said, so your domain is what tells people where to go. That actual addresses on the internet are IP addresses, and they're these strings of numbers that nobody except my husband can remember. He can't remember phone numbers, but he can remember IP addresses. I ask you. And so, what it means is that I go into your domain settings over at GoDaddy, and because this one isn't on Cloudflare yet, and just tell it, okay, when people type in your domain, point to the new host instead of the old one.
The only thing I'm a little bit concerned on is I think, we've recommended that, you get your domain name from somewhere else. Probably your email, depending. If your email is being offered, you still don't want to use it. You want to go. But with Cloudflare, I don't think we've totally clarified why we should take that. We've talked about giving it some more protection, but I don't know if you agree with this. I don't think we've given enough insight about why to make that next step to use Cloudflare.
Right.
Do you agree?
Yes. So, and again, so what's a Cloudflare? Which is, Cloudflare is an interesting thing because it is and it isn't a CDN, and CDN is a content delivery network. And
we just introduced another bit of jargon.
Yes. We have the all jargon all the time podcast today. But a CDN is meant to help speed up your site by taking all your files, your image files, or maybe your audio files if you're hosting them yourself, or all those things, your assets, and putting them copying them into a bunch of different places. So a traditional CDN will say, well, we have data centers, in all kinds of countries around the world. And so we're going to copy all of your images and stuff into those different data centers so that people who live in that area will get them faster because they're not going as far.
And it can make a big difference. I have a couple of sites that I'm personally involved with, and I still use Key CDN, the old company that Brian Jackson, who used to be a former panelist. Still love the guy, writes great stuff, and he's moved on to another company now, a hosting company, Kinster. But he used to be involved in Key, and I still use them, and it does make a difference, doesn't it?
Well, it especially makes a difference, if most of your visitors, your customers, the people who come to your website, are in the same country that you are, then if your hosting company, if your main servers at your hosting company are also in that country, it will probably be fast for most of you. But if you have people coming from all around the world, which, I do have many clients and where they've got, a lot of...
You'd be amazed about the people I get to the WP-Tonic to listen to our words of wisdom.
And I do, I get some visitors from, certainly from Europe, legitimate ones. If you see a whole lot of IP addresses coming in from, Russia and the Ukraine, that you got to wonder about that. I mean, I'm only publishing in English.
Be worried.
So.
And I'm not being racist there. It's just that they, some of the best hackers in the world are based there, aren't they? They're very smart people,
right? Or they run run things through there because and that's just so. So your CDN is meant to make your website faster by distributing your content around the world. So
I'm going to be cruel. I'm going to be cruel here. Let's get back, because I know we had to do that because we went off on another. Let's get back to Cloudflare.
Right. So Cloudflare doesn't do that in the same way. Cloudflare it kind of provides a proxy in between you and and your visitors, and it caches your content, and so it will serve it faster. But a lot of the value of Cloudflare is that you can push the "I'm under attack" button when, if something like a distributed denial of service or even just, maybe it isn't really an attack. Maybe you've published something that was just insanely popular and you're getting thousands of visitors at once. And your site's going to go down if you don't do something.
No chance of that for me.
Well, it's, I've had one or two posts on my personal blog that were quite popular, but never at the, what they used to call the /dot effect and then the dig effect and then the who knows what effect it is now. But, that something gets published somewhere and suddenly you have tens of thousands of visitors coming in all at the same time. And it will just, lock your servers up and mess up anybody else who's on that server if you can't do something like, if you don't have an appropriate sort of caching setup so that that people can see the content without actually having to go back and communicate with the server every single time. And that's one of the reasons that WordPress is slower than flat files, is that everything is dynamic. It's pulled out of your database, every single time. There has to be a lot of back and forth communication. So Cloudflare says, all right, we're going to cache this. We're going to put this in this little ball here. It's just going to stay there unless you actually update it. It will just stay as it was when we kind of took our snapshot. And that's what people will see when they come to your website. And it doesn't have to, and so they don't have to talk to your server and eat up your resources. And so having your DNS run through something that does that means that if there's a flood of attacks, whether it's, just bots coming in or an actual, deliberate attack on your domain for some reason, or, sudden popularity, it won't bring your site down. So that's what Cloudflare does for you.
So recap. So with the Cloudflare, it's helping with that caching to some degree, and it helps with if you do become under attack or you've written something or something on your site, you're getting a lot of new traffic. It's a traffic balance mechanism as well. Is that right?
Yes. So it will help it. And if you have because hosting companies will always charge you for something. And this is one thing when you're picking a hosting company, you need to decide, because there is really not such a thing as unlimited everything, unlimited bandwidth, unlimited. It's not true, because servers have limits. So you have to look and see, okay, is your hosting company going to charge you for traffic? In that case, you really want to make sure you're doing something to block the bots out so that the only traffic you're being charged for is legitimate traffic. Are they charging for resources, which is, your CPU time and that kind of stuff. And in that case, that's when, traffic can still be an issue there if all of your traffic has to communicate with your server and then use up your database.
How does it work with, say, I'm just choosing them out there. I'm not saying they're a Pacific, I was going to say problem. I don't even mean that. Let's take something like WP Engine, because they don't like you using caching plugins, because they're caching the site themselves quite heavily. They really do. So how does that got any experience how something like WP Engine works with Cloudflare?
It works just fine. The big Now Secure site that we moved over to WP Engine, they were running all their DNS and a bunch of other stuff through Cloudflare already. It was very easy. You can put the Cloudflare plugin in. Also, I know that at least WP Rocket you can use with WP Engine. They actually worked very hard to make sure that was still compatible. So yes, the thing is that caching plugins are useful up to a point. And you may see a lot of improvement on a site that doesn't offer server-side caching. But your best caching is going to come from your host, where they set it up on your server for you. And, so that's going to help to some degree with the issue of the dynamic content and the calls back to the database. But you can add Cloudflare on top of that. And then, the biggest problem is if you're testing something, remembering to turn off all the caching in all the places you have caching, because otherwise you'll be sitting there saying, I made this change in the CSS. Why isn't it showing up?
Yeah, you're reading my mind there. But also, is there any around e-commerce, or if you've got a learning site, membership site, are there any consequences that you've got to be aware of using these systems, Sally?
You will probably want to set up what's known as a page rule in Cloudflare to tell it not to cache certain things. So, you want to set one up to tell it not to cache the admin area. And then you may want to set one up to tell it, not to cache anything under, shop, or, specifically your cart page, your checkout page. And that usually seems to take care of it. I have not run into further issues. And for the most part, if you have an intelligent hosting company, they will already not cache those pages. So you shouldn't need to worry about that.
Go back and have a look at it, because I get the impression you're a big fan of it.
I use it a lot, and it's been helpful. And part of the thing was that I ran into a case with several of my sites that are on SiteGround, where we were getting a lot of overage, and they were saying you're using too many resources, and it was basically because of bots visiting the site. And as soon as I implemented the free Cloudflare, that problem went away.
Oh, that's the other thing, because they offer a free service and a paid. Got any insight basically what the difference between the free and the paid is?
There's more stuff you can do with the paid service, but so far I have only needed the free one, and they have now set up a thing where if you need more page rules to help handle stuff like your e-commerce, you can buy those separately. So you don't, the paid plans on Cloudflare are fairly expensive.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you can do an awful lot with the free service. The other thing that I've used it for is providing free SSL certificates for people whose hosting does not do Let's Encrypt yet.
Oh, they provide that as well, do they? Oh, that's
so what you could do is, they will encrypt the part that's between them and Cloudflare, but they'll also give you a certificate you can, copy and paste in at the hosting company, so that the communications between your host and Cloudflare are also encrypted. And you really do want that end-to-end encryption.
Yeah.
That's a nice feature, I think.
We just added another bit of technology to this.
Yes, but this is important, and we've talked about it on the show before. Is that you need to have, an HTTPS connection.
Yeah, what Sally is, and it's best if you're building a new site, if you're building something from the ground up, it's best to do it from day one, because it is a little bit painful moving a non-HTTPS site and turn it in. You've got a lot of external scripts and that. It is a bit messy, isn't it?
Yes, I mean it's usually, thank God there are these a really simple SSL and other plugins to help with that. The thing where a lot of people get caught up is they don't remember to go in to their analytics and webmaster tools and stuff, or whatever they're calling it, Search Console.
Called Search Console now.
Yes.
Why do they have to keep renaming stuff? I have no idea.
It's the Google thing, I guess. But I thought Webmaster Tools was pretty self-explanatory.
It was. Web Console. What the hell does that tell you?
Yes.
It does. I think they need to read that article.
They might do. Yes. You need to go into your analytics and make sure that it's then tracking your HTTPS version of your site, because otherwise people will be like, I put an SSL certificate on my site and my traffic just dropped. It's like, yeah, well, are you still tracking your HTTP site? Oh!
No, but it's understandable though, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, it's easy to overlook those.
I've done it.
Things.
I've done it.
So,
be truthful about it.
There are some, checklists published about, things, and it can be handy to have one of those with you when you're setting it up, as you're setting it up. But it will be, it will be very, very helpful to do that. So, I do like Cloudflare a lot. I mean, I haven't had a reason to pay for the paid service. And I think that most of the sort of small business and nonprofit clients I work for don't need that. Some people will decide that they do, but it doesn't do quite the same thing as a regular CDN. So you may wish to use both in some cases. You may not. You may find that the way it handles its caching, things are fast enough in multiple locations, and that's sufficient. It kind of depends on do you have a lot of large assets? Do you get a lot of traffic? And do you get a lot of traffic from a number of different companies?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've covered it, and I think so. Basically, folks, don't get your domain name with the hosting company. Keep that separate. It's a really good idea. Keep your email separate. I had a brain fart there at the beginning. You set up the MX and all that with your domain name. And then also look at Cloudflare, which I'm going to next week or over the weekend. If I get a spare moment, I have to re-look at it because Sally's sold it to me again. So I have another look at that because it doesn't sound bad, does it, Sally? I can see why you're a bit of a fan of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I said, and they do have a nice switch that for put it in development mode, and you can do this either at the Cloudflare end or using the Cloudflare plugin, so that it will temporarily turn it off when you're working on something and testing it and need to see it update. So as long as you remember that, it won't interfere, but it can be one of those things where it's like, I'm not seeing the changes. Oh, that's because we need to, clear the Cloudflare cache. And
yeah, I thought we'd just have this discussion because a lot of people, they just, especially if in the development crowd, as you take it as gospel that everybody understands all these things, and they don't, basically, do they?
They don't necessarily. I mean, it's like, the assumption that, all young people are good at technology, and no, that, there's things that they are accustomed to using. That doesn't mean they actually understand it. So.
No, they don't. So, Sally, thanks for coming on the show. Thank God you did, because they would have had to listen to me for an hour. And that definitely, I do not want to do that to the audience. But, Sally, how can people get to know some more about you and what you're up to? You
can find me at WPFangirl.com. Also at eastbaywp.com, which is our meetup website.
Oh, how are the meetups going?
They're going pretty well. I mean, the contributor day was fairly small. I think we had fewer than 10 people, but still we got a lot done, and we've had a number of meetups on good topics, and it continues along.
Oh, and I've got to mention, most of the panel will be at the
WordCamp Sacramento next weekend. So you and I will both be there. John Locke will be there. Kim will be there. And Mendel will be there.
We're going to probably do a round table on the Saturday. It's actually booked for the Friday, but I don't see the sense. We might as well attempt to do it.
No, I mean, the thing is, I won't leave here until after the normal, but people who have got to travel from a longer distance are going to be on airplanes, and so it's, yes, if we try something to do.
And Bill, one of my old former, he's going to be there, and he said I'm going to bring my equipment, but he's going to bring the sound nuts. He's going to return and join us, and I'll try and rustle up everybody. We have one mic. And find a room, and hopefully some of our external people will join us as well. Got to change the date, got to get that organised. How can people get a hold of me, folks? It's quite easy. You can get me on Twitter, and that's at Jonathan Denwood. You can email me at jonathan@WP-Tonic. I do answer my email. And I think it's been a great show, and I think Sally's really, we're giving some value here, Sally. And the best way to support the show, folks, is to give us a review on iTunes. I say it every week, and we get the odd one, but if we could have some more, it would really help the show. The figures are going up quite nicely recently. I think we must be doing something right. You got any comments, suggestion for guests, topics, please email me or Twitter me. It's really great to get suggestions or input about the show. And we'll see you next week for another roundtable and another, I think, WordPress junkie discussion. See you next week, folks.
Bye. Everybody.